Speaking of radicals and radical, think for a moment how this moment in time, how radical it is. Arguably, history is going to look back at this moment in time as the most radical era, I think, in history. This moment in time, as you know, is wiping out whole industries, and it's forcing other industries to totally transform themselves. We are right in the beginning of this chaos. And how about the words themselves? Retail store. Those words are 7,000 years old. Do you think we need a new language? So the Robin Report, we decided to expand on our mission to help radicalize the industry and its language, and more importantly, its thinking, and ultimately, its action. And to do this, we're launching, and that's why we're all here, the Robin Report Retail Radical Awards Program in collaboration with our great partners, SAP. But what about the unrecognized, unseen radicals that reside in our legacy brand and retail businesses? So those are the people that we're going to find, the doers and the thinkers in the legacy world, and nobody else is doing that.
Thank you, everyone, for coming this morning. Anil Agarwal just texted me that due to the weather and where they're staying tonight, he's hosting a night at the Thunder Down Under at the Excalibur. True. For anybody that wants to go. Thanks for, as Robin said, thanks for coming out this morning and joining us in the basement of the Venetian. It sort of feels like we're the Indie Film Channel, and the Cannes Film Festival, CANNE, is going on upstairs. But I promise there's no PowerPoints, no bar charts, none of that's going to happen this morning. We're just going to have a good open conversation. As a little radical conversation starter, raise your hand if you were not on Tinder, Grindr, or Bubble last night. No. Robin did not raise his hand. Notice. Okay, so first swipe to John McCoy, who John works for SAP Hybris, a digital commerce software company. They are this morning's collaborators with us. Thank you to John, and thank you to SAP for all they continue to do for all that comes next. So John's going to speak for a few minutes.
Thank you very much for the intro. My name is John McCoy, and I've been at SAP for about 1.5 years. And prior to that, though, 1.5 years ago, I was in your shoes. I was leading a team of fantastic individuals for a $3 billion retailer, and we were faced with making a lot of difficult decisions. As many of you know, we were looking at ways to potentially reinvent ourselves, right? We were struggling with some of the internal elements as well as external elements. We were looking at our competitors, online pure plays that were eating away at our market share. But the elephant in the room, I think, for us was that wasn't really what ultimately led us into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. But it was actually the internal pain points that we had and were experiencing as a whole. You see, we were so focused on trying to figure out how to still be a merchant-driven organization, or how to still be a store operationally driven organization, as opposed to being a customer-driven organization. And the amount of strife and conflict, and I would say unhealthy conflict, that existed within our own organization, I would say, was what ultimately led us into Chapter 11 bankruptcy, liquidation, to where that 15,000 employee organization, retailer, $3 billion retailer, see if you can guess who it is maybe at the end, doesn't exist anymore today. But it was because of those particular things internally that we could not do. We had created a machine that was so based in operational efficiency, right? Margin optimization, all of those traditional KPIs, that we had left the customer completely out of the organization. So now here at SAP, we understand that there are a lot of different facets that you guys are facing and decisions that you are making today that will impact the overall future health and growth of your organization. And we know that digital is hard. Doing those things, my personal experience in this, is hard to do. And so some of the investments that we've made and how SAP has had to be radical and change is we've created a new team. I have the opportunity of leading that team. And what we are doing is helping retailers, direct-to-consumer organizations, and brands figure out not necessarily what they need to do, because you have a lot of understanding of that already, great expertise, but how to do it. We're calling it our Customer for Life program. And my team's KPIs, our portions of our compensation as individuals, is based upon your KPIs and your success. This is new for SAP. This is how we are bridging the gap between software and technology and the overall business KPIs, planning and executing growth. So with that, we're excited to make that announcement as how we are helping bridge that gap between what it is that you should be doing, how you should be doing it, and how we all now have skin in the game. And with that, I'd like to turn the time back over to you. The radical ideas, I'm excited. I've been talking to some of these panels here a little bit beforehand, and they've got some great content planned for you on how to do radical things within your own organizations to continue to plow forward and nurture growth. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Thank you. You can put that over there. Yeah. Okay, so just to put into context a little bit about this great guy named Bill Cunningham who died a year and a half ago. He was a photographer for the New York Times. He's a guy who covered fashion and culture and society in New York and in Paris since 1960. His archive, which I just had recently access to, will become the most valued archive in the history of New York City. Here's a guy who took amazing things, a true radical who lived an amazing life. I interviewed him 24 years ago. When he died, a year and a half ago, I went in my basement, retrieved the Betacam tapes. For those of you, many of you probably do know what those are, but those are big fat tapes, not something that you can use on your phone. And I pulled it up and I watched it and had him transferred to a digital file and started this process of creating this documentary called The Times of Bill. At Instagram, it's at The Times of Bill. And I started doing it as sort of a hobby. And Sarah Jessica Parker agreed to narrate it. And last summer, I reached out to Angela Ahrendts at Apple. And I said, because of what Apple's trying to do with their radical programming called Today at Apple, wouldn't it be great to take this documentary and promote it in a unique kind of way, rather than a film festival, then a premiere and going onto Netflix? And because Bill was a street photographer and a fashion historian, she agreed to do this. And we started this whole tour where they were promoting the film. I traveled to London, Paris, and Tokyo, and Singapore, and Los Angeles, and San Francisco, and in New York, and we did these great events. But here was this radical guy who at 87 lived in a tiny little room in Carnegie Hall Studios, and he slept on a bed that was on a cardboard or on a plywood platform with 4 crates next to all of his pictures, and he shared a bathroom with everybody on the 12th floor for 40 years in Carnegie Hall, who had this amazing sort of radical passion for what he did. And it's kind of a testament to, he said at Apple at the 92nd Street Y a couple of years ago, right before he died, and he was like, look at technology. Technology is changing everything that we do. And he could hardly hear. He's on the stage. He's impassioned on it. It's on my LinkedIn page of what he said. He said, technology, you have to design with the inside of your mind. And that, look at the lines at 58th Street in Madison at that Apple store. Do you see lines coming out of Bergdorf Goodman or Saks Fifth Avenue? And it was the whole point of that. And so it's kind of how this has led to me starting Live Rockin' and this whole notion of being here today with these guys, of what does radical mean, and how do you define radical in today's world? It's, as Robin said, it's clearly changing. A legacy used to be something that you left that was really great, and now in many cases it's something that you're stuck with, right? Bricks and mortar used to represent the foundations of retail throughout the world. Now it's cement, right? Disruptive, of course. We've all wanted to be disruptive for a long time. Used to be a bad thing, now it's a really good thing. But everybody wants to do it now, so we want to be a little bit more radical. So this morning we've gathered together our great group here. We'll try to get out of here by what time, Deborah? 9 o'clock or so. As for the Bradley Cooper thing, just something I'm stuck with for the rest of my life, sort of like AI and machine learning that Katie knows all about. So please meet Katie Finnegan, Darren Hall, and Chris Duffy. Katie is a principal at Store 8, Walmart's incubation group that aspires to transform the future of retail. She spends an insane amount of time with Mark Lowry. That's what they said yesterday, right? She also grew up a few houses down from me on Long Island. Emma Watson is playing Katie in the new movie Leaving on Jet's Plane. According to his bio, Darren Hall is trying to improve the buying experience for over 20 years. What?
I'll take that.
Yeah, exactly. You should. That's what I took Bradley Cooper, baby. Prior to joining Williams and Sonoma in his current role, he was at Amazon, Guthrie Renker, and L'Oreal. Matthew McConaughey is playing Darren in the upcoming The Nightmare at West Elm. That was pretty clever. 4 o'clock this morning, I came up with that one. Chris Duffy is Home Depot's VP of in-store environment. And of course, Jude Law is playing Chris in next year's Orange is in the Black. There we go. Okay. Katie, so the whole idea of radical and what is it? So how do you interpret that, in your career, but certainly now in your role in all that's happening at Walmart, Store 8, and Jet?
Yeah, I actually just got this question outside in a little promo video thing that we're filming, and honestly, the first thing that came to mind is, I think the way it's interpreted is radical is really just thinking 10 plus generations out, right? And not focusing on the near term and not getting blindsided or distracted by what's commercially viable today. And so you're not focused on those like small incremental things, you're really kind of looking at, okay, but when autonomous vehicles are a real thing, when these things that we know will happen, maybe they happen in 10 years, maybe they happen in 20, but regardless they're happening, what does the future look like? But I think what's unfortunate though is that we have to use the word radical because you kind of just have to do that to survive. And so it should just be retail, right? But it's perceived that way. So
you have to use an aggressive term,
yes.
Or like an exclusive report on a
and
television
if you look, I mean, actually, so I ran all strategy and fundraising for Jet prior to my role here, and I had to do, Mark made me do, and I was on, if you remember, microfiche, which my sisters were like, I don't know what microfiche is. I was like, oh my God. But I had to go through all of the analyst reports for Woolworths and do all this research for this pitch for Doug, the CEO of Walmart. And it's really interesting going through, like they were on the top of their game and they fell to Walmart so fast. And so if you're not thinking that way, it's like the second you're comfortable, you're gone, I think.
Darren?
Yeah, I'd tag on to that line. I think where I've been lucky to have some successes is by coming into work every day and thinking I'm wrong, right? And the analogy I would use, you'll hear a lot of analogies today. I think of the Beatles, right? And if you think of the legacy of the Beatles, do you think of Love Me Do and The Hard Day's Night, or do you think of Sgt. Pepper's and Let It Be, right? This is a group of people who created their market share on something super popular, but to keep that long horizon of their career and their legacy, they listened to their customers and they evolved with their customers and they evolved their distribution. They did everything by listening to their customers. And I think that's something that's super important to keep in mind. And to the point of, is it radical? I think it's just being able to eschew what you know to work in search of something else that may work better. And I don't know that that's a new concept. Jack Welch was big on that. Like there were all these people in the past who have continued to have that evolution. And how do we bring that spirit back instead of having people be worried to try things new? There's never been a time to do new things cheaper. So how do you just push people over the edge to try things?
Chris?
Yeah, first off, thanks everybody for getting up this morning. This is probably a tough putt, I would imagine, for a couple folks in the room. When I think about retail and radical, at the Home Depot, we talk a lot about having one foot on the dock and one foot in the boat. We still have to run a really good business today in our stores and our warehouses, but we also know that we have to be thinking about what's around the corner, what the future will bring in the next 5 to 6 years, and then maybe even 8 to 10 to 12 years out. And I think I don't know that that's terribly different than what retail has always had to deal with it, but I think the pace of these changes has accelerated so much that the flexibility required to have one foot on the dock and one foot on the boat is at such a premium today that maybe that's a lot different than it's been in the past.
And I want to actually think that brings up a great point, because I think in the past you could wait for those signals to react, but if you're waiting to be told what you need to do, it's almost too late. And the analogy I always use is Uber, actually. I just moved to the West Coast, but previously living in New York my whole life, I never had a problem with the taxi system. It worked. I never thought twice about it. It was annoying a little bit when it rained, but generally it was okay. But now this thing, Uber, came into my life, and I can never experience my life or even imagine my life without it. And so those are the things that are starting to come, and they're coming on real fast, that if you wait for a signal for the customer to ask you for that sometimes, you've almost missed the boat.
Mm-hmm. I think that to all of those points, if you look at legacy companies, there's a half full scenario of working in a legacy company, and there's a half empty scenario of working in a legacy company, right? Would you rather work in the company that you're in right now and have a paycheck and a gym membership and medical benefits, or be, radical in a startup where you're starving, but you're nimble and you're all of those different things? So what's, Darren, what's the half-full scenario of working in a company that's been around for a long time, that is in, like so many, in this transformation?
Yeah, and I've had the pleasure to work in everything from Series A startup to established company like an Amazon, like a Williams-Sonoma. And I think the great thing about having a legacy and back to the paycheck idea is you don't have to go out looking for capital all the time. Like, that's such a huge benefit. When you're in startup, part of your flexibility is driven by the existential questions you run into every single day. Like, am I going to be around tomorrow? And that forces people to move with more flexibility and more speed. I think what I've tried to do at points in my career is, like, how do you take some of those that flexibility, how do you take some of that work and make that happen inside of a company that has values, has capital, has a legacy, has people who have extreme depth at position? I mean, I think that's one of the things you miss in a startup is, like, you talk to somebody in operations and they've been doing operations and they can pick up the phone and talk with UPS or FedEx or whoever and get action. And I think that's such a gift that people with legacy have, especially if your founder is still alive and can talk to the values.
What's the hard part?
What's the hard part? I think the hardest conversations anywhere is trying to explain to people that what they have been doing that made them famous needs to change. It's so hard to, like, there are all those old sayings of, like, you have to let go of one ring to grab onto the other. People think you're crazy because you're trying to say, what is it? What is the next piece? Or, you talk about Uber, or when I was in college, I did a streaming video project for a really large national video chain. They had the key to do that, they didn't, and now they're gone, right? So what causes people to think that you can't do both at the same time,
Chris?
right?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I love this question. I've been, like, chomping at the bit to get at this.
Oh, good. Go.
Because we have a super proud legacy at the Home Depot, and our founders 35 years ago built this infrastructure of 2,000 warehouses. We call them stores today, but these are points of distribution for us. We've got 90% of the U.S. population that lives within a 10-minute drive of our stores. And I tend to think that the vision that they had is what we're just now starting to see, because the environment is so different that we've got to think about our legacy and think about these assets and all the things that have made us great over the last 30 years in a slightly different light. And that can be a challenge. But I think the future for retail is bright. It's just going to be different.
But I look at Home Depot, for me, I don't look at it as, I've never ordered anything from, and I'm a pretty mobile guy in terms of ordering things from Jet and the other guys. But Home Depot seems is like a more of an impulse destination. I've never ordered anything. I've never been impulsively thought, I got to go buy some weed killer. But I want to go to Home Depot and buy it. So how do you look at that? Because it really is different than these guys and other businesses, that it's really this destination that you really want to travel to.
Yeah, our business is a project-based business for the do-it-yourself customer,
Yeah.
and then we have a really, really important cohort of, we call them pro customers. These are contractors that make a living in the business, that rely on our stores really as an extension of their business. And so what we try to do is focus on those specific customer segments and the specific customer needs within those segments. Replacing the flooring that you and I may need somebody to install for us, that's a very different customer experience from the pro that's coming in to buy concrete and drywall and lumber for the job that they have coming up. And our business has been successful by not thinking broadly, but being really specific in the experiences that we create for those specific customers.
Okay, what's the half-empty scenario?
Half empty, I think, the downside of a legacy in retail, and I think you alluded to this, is that you tend to have very entrenched org charts in a business. And unfortunately, sometimes customers customers will see the seams in those org charts in their experience, whether it's online or in the store or through the supply chain. And that can be tough to overcome, and it takes a very intentional effort to try to train the leaders in a retail environment to think about the end-to-end value chain, not just in the context of their org chart, but in the context of the broader customer experience and the value offering.
Well, the legacy of all legacy companies likely is certainly Walmart. When they entered into this world, and they were always the first company that Amazon was compared to forever. They still are, and there's still this sort of battle going on. Last year when somebody from Minnesota gave a presentation with bar charts and PowerPoint presentations, and it was really in front of 6,000 semi-tech savvy or really tech savvy people, and it wasn't very powerful. And then Mark Lowry got up there with Scott Friend from Bain Capital, and they sat on a couch, and within 20 minutes, this company, Walmart, at least in my mind, shot to a relevancy factor that they probably had never anticipated on the heels of what they had done with Jet. And it shot them past a lot of other established big box retailers, and it was an exciting time. Obviously, Mark Lowry got attacked a bit yesterday for the fourth quarter, and it's why Nordstrom's wants to go private. But Katie, Bentonville, Arkansas has been known in our world as the mothership, but still it's in Bentonville, Arkansas. How do you sort of balance that? You were in a startup at Huckster, and Jet bought it. How do you balance all that with you're trying to do and incubate, which is almost an oxymoron in the old days of what Walmart was, in what you're doing now?
I think there's two essential things that have to be true for this to work, and I'm fortunate enough that I believe these are true in my scenario now. First and foremost, so I've talked to tons of people in different companies that are trying to do something similar. It has to be a concerted, bought-in effort from the top. And from the top, I mean Doug McMillon, the CEO of Walmart, and the Walton family. So the Walton family is totally bought in to store number 8 and what we're doing. And because to the Q4 earnings, I mean, it's going to be 5, 6, 7 years before anything I'm working on actually has a material impact. Yes, it can have a PR impact, and we can show Net Promoter Score and other things.
But isn't that that's the half-empty part of being a public company? It's why Nordstrom's wants to go private.
But if you can get people from the top bought in, you can do it publicly. And fortunately enough, the Waltons own 51% of the Walmart stock. And so having their buy-in means ultimately you have the shareholders buy-in. And so you can't do it without that. And so you can't just have your SVP on board. You have to have everyone on board through the chain. But then I think the second thing that is really important, and it's kind of a unicorn type opportunity, is you have to have the balance sheet and the cash to be able to do this in a way that it's not impacting your overall EPS and your earnings, right? So you can put hundreds of millions of dollars into something. I'm not saying that's what I'm doing at Story, but hypothetically you could, and it will not move the needle for Walmart's bottom line. And so you have to have that balance sheet to be able to do it in a way that gives you that leash that you really need to do it right. And if you're not, then you're answering always to short-term decisions, and you're fundamentally making different decisions.
And the half-empty scenario.
I think the half-empty scenario is no one likes
Jet,
change.
Jet was Jet, and it was it's still in Hoboken,
Yeah.
and it was this really great sort of nimble, fun environment. And now it's a part of Walmart. So what's the half-empty scenario? And there is one, so don't.
Yeah, no. There is there's definitely highs and lows, like there is with any startup or anything you're doing. But I think no one likes change. I will say, from Doug and the board's perspective, there is full concerted belief behind what Mark is doing, what Greg Fran is doing, and all of them. But there's 2.3 million other people involved in that, right? That maybe weren't in the room when those decisions were made. And so change is hard, and you have to be willing to disrupt yourself and the way you did things previously, which by definition just means more work for people, which is some people are on board and some
Pick
people
your battles.
Some people aren't.
Yeah.
And so which is I'm not quite good at. I want to pick every battle, but Yeah, you got to pick your battles.
But I think
Good to
there's
know,
a-
Katie. Good to know.
I'm working on that.
That's okay. Don't stop work. No. You're doing just fine.
I think there's one thing to think about is you talk about opportunity and turning some of the weaknesses into opportunity. If you have a big balance sheet, you also have the opportunity to create efficiency in other areas using technology and then to take that to reinvest. Like everywhere I've been, that's been the big showpiece. Like, show me the money, show me the money. To your point, there are certain things you're going to jump into that take years to evolve, but there are certain things you can jump into that takes days, weeks, months to do it.
Very true.
And if you can show that a small group of people focused on doing something tangential to the core business is creating efficiency, and you keep your hands on those dollars, you can create a fairly quick system of recycling those dollars into things that are new and show people how to do the work as opposed to talking about how to do the work.
And I'll say one point on that actually, with such a legacy company as I oversee PR and sort of external thought leadership for store number 8. And I'll be frank in that my efforts, and I have my whole strategy around how we approach, the external world, 65% of my efforts are actually internal PR. Because keeping the internal groups happy and showing those short-term wins and those incremental benefits is how I get the ability to do what I'm doing in the long term. And so, yes, I care about external PR, but to be completely honest, I do external PR to fund internal PR. It is really what I'm spending my efforts on.
What about you, Dan?
I was going to say, to try to make I think it's hard when you go to a panel, to try to make things really tangible. There's a professor at Dartmouth called VJ Ganjarajan. Sorry, VJ. If you look at three-box framework, it's a very interesting framework where he basically says you have to have a team. If you're innovating, you focus on what can you do right now, what are you doing to make go away, and what is it that you're doing to invent this farther out future. And if you can have that balance, people will see you like any other team. You're one foot on the dock, one in the boat, right? They're helping me get something done, but at the same time, I feel like the culture is moving forward. I feel like I'm seeing things that are new, and I think that seed is such an important seed to plant while the industry is being so hard on retail right now.
But there is, the legacy mentality, right? And we've all met them, and certainly smart people that have been in this industry for a long time, but they are cut from the same cloth, as we say. And the idea that they're bringing in new talent, and look what HR and headhunters do right now. It's a complete free-for-all in terms of trying to fit that person into a company, whether it's a startup or a legacy company, and having these part of management or part of a board or just part of the team that making this change. Because some of these guys are really, and gals, are really cocky. And they know they have all the answers, but I think they're really afraid right now because this is truly uncharted waters. So how do you think that fits, and not necessarily just in your company, but just in general with what you observe, Katie?
Well, I think there's always benefits to having multiple points of view at the table. And so I agree, it's definitely uncharted territory, it's scary, but I also will say that, from Walmart in particular, a lot of the sort of ingrained processes and protocols are why we have the cash to do what I'm doing. And so every day I think about that way. The stores spit off the cash that allows me to do what I do. And so I have to remember that and I have to appreciate that. And then I also know that, while I'm completely like, let's just start from a white space and start over, I think that sometimes the legacy perspective actually helps bring me a little bit down to earth, where it's like, yeah, but you're not going to scale that to 160 million Americans a week. And it's like, oh yeah, I've never actually dealt with that scale. And so there's definitely a nice balance that's brought by having both perspectives at the table.
Chris?
We've had to bring a lot of talent into Home Depot over the years. We've got, we're incredibly fortunate that we've got 400,000 associates that talk to our customers every single day, and a lot of our leaders have grown up in that environment through the company, and they're fantastic leaders. We're also, I think, in many cases, smart enough to know what we don't know, and that's when you got to go find people that can supplement the skills you have internally. The hard part, I think, is making sure that the people we're bringing in have the right mentors and the right coaches and the right peers and partners that can help them sort of absorb the culture and assimilate. Because otherwise, any big company is going to kind of chew people up if they don't have the right people looking out for them.
So I would add the collaboration thing is super important. And one of the things you have to realize is retailers by their nature hire people who are nice people, who are good at working with people, and that's been a bedrock and a foundational thing. However, when you put people in a room and you're trying to create a roadmap for 5 years from now, if you're trying to run that technical roadmap or the experience roadmap out of consensus, that's the death sentence. And so you need to find your way. And I think you talked about Barry Diller earlier. I had a lunch with him once where he said, listen, you have to manage an island of misfit toys. Like when things are going well, you hire people who are very similar to you and they agree with things and the meetings go well and like everybody's happy and it's good. But when things go poorly, who's standing around the table to give you different points of views, to give you different ideas? And some of it is just learning how to argue and then hug it out at the end, right? Everybody bring a group of people who are going to have different viewpoints. Some are going to be right, some wrong. And how do you blend it together?
There wasn't a whole lot of hugging it out, I have to tell you, in my 16 years with Barry Diller. But the idea of nice, I think it's really great because nice is never what you want to be called first. If somebody says, what do you think of that person? What do you think of Katie? Well, she's nice, but there's always a but following that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't think that's ever been the first person.
It could be the second thing, but trust me, for the rest of your life, you will know that if somebody describes you as first nice and then he's really smart, start with really smart, really great executive, really great with numbers, and he's nice, and she's nice. But if it's the first thing, that was a sort of a Dillerism kind of scenario. But it is that idea that you can surround yourself with these misfit toys. I mean, I was made CEO of HSN. I had never had P&L responsibility for anything in my life. I ran the broadcasting group. And suddenly said, here, don't fuck it up and surround you with smart people that do that. But it is the challenge today, I think, that these executives are so afraid, and not all of them, but certainly, look, there's 9,000 people here, everybody's trying to learn and figure out this thing, but it is a radical change to what Robin had said at the beginning of they're afraid, so doesn't that create some potential tension within companies?
I think it's a really important point because the change is happening so rapidly. I mean, we all wear aprons at Home Depot, and we've got literally the core values of our company.
Do you wear them in the office?
Yes.
Cool.
I
like that.
So we have our core values literally on the chest of our apron, and one of those core values is building strong relationships. And I'm convinced that value is one of the most important ones for us, not because we want to be nice to each other, we all want to get along. I mean, that's great if we do. But I think the magic in those strong relationships is that when you take the time to build them, it's a heck of a lot easier to walk down the hall to your peer and have a really direct conversation about whatever the hell just happened. And that is something that creates velocity in a business because you get out of these massive email trails, and the relationships facilitate a much more direct decision-making process, I think.
Darren?
I'm still stuck. You've mentioned Angela Ahrens a couple of times, and think about what it took for when she did Art of the Trench for Burberry, right? And there is probably no company that was steeped in legacy, like they were. And it was the idea of, I think she did a great job of selling the vision of what was going to happen. Here's how people bought back in World War I when we created a trench coat. Here's how people buy now in a social way. And we're going to try to get there.
You bet.
And that was not, I remember it as being launched on Tumblr. That may be totally wrong, but that was not, I wouldn't suspect that was a massively expensive endeavor to make that first step. But getting everybody moving in the right direction and then planting a flag, I have to imagine that the rest of the team built around that and saw where it was going. And when you get that energy where all the people, I think generally, I have very few people I've met in retail that don't want to do the right thing. It's in your blood, it's in the DNA. But trying to help people understand what that first step is to really get engaged and then have a passion for something that's different than the passion they've been having for X number of years. I think if you can have those little moments of being at a stand-up meeting for the team and showing a little thing that you're demoing and get feedback and be willing to take feedback, it goes such a long way to just have people feel it.
And so the combination or the evolution, Jet to Walmart is a perfect example. What was that first meeting like, Katie? Okay, here's all the people from New Jersey, and now all of a sudden you're in
Well, so
Bentonville.
I was actually fortunate to be in the first meeting with Doug well before the deal happened. So the deal happened directly between Doug and Mark. It wasn't like a corp dev sort of thing. And it was interesting. He came in with Dan Bartlett, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
yeah.
Dan
Dan Bartlett. There's two Dans in comms. I always get them confused. He and Dan Bartlett, I didn't know which one was Doug, which one was Dan. I was like, hi, nice to meet you, nice to meet you.
Well, they all look alike.
Yeah, there's like, just like white dude, clean cut, like, yeah.
Exactly, Bentonville. Go ahead.
So they both came in. It was me, Mark, and the two of them in a conference room. And he sat down and he was just like, listen, I know that someone has to figure out this digital thing. And if it's not me sitting in the seat, it will be someone else. And that like first comment was so interesting because this was, no NDAs, no nothing, right? And he just laid all his cards out where he's like, I'm making a concerted effort to do something big. I'm not playing around. I'm not dancing around. I've been in this role for whatever, a few years. I probably have a few more years to make a big, stage turn left or whatever it is. But if I don't, someone else will be sitting here doing that. And so again, it came from the top. And I think that that's the only way you can make such a.
But was there a concerted effort on Mark's part and your part to say, okay, but you're Walmart, you're huge, you're this, but you got to keep us nimble, otherwise this is not going to work, it's going to fail.
So yes, and not to speak too much about Mark's previous experience, but he had sold a company called Quidsi to another major retailer. I don't think that sort of cultural integration went as well from what I've heard from others. And so a large part of it was about 6 to 9 months that we went back and forth on deal terms and things like that. And a large part of it was that. It was not, what's the share price? Well, yeah, but we had that figured out. And actually what was really interesting, and I think why it's worked so well, is Mark and Doug spent an exorbitant amount of time together. Like every week he was flying somewhere last minute to meet him somewhere. And then actually Doug felt very strongly that Mark and Greg Ferran, who's his counterpart for the stores operation, had to actually be on the same page. And so they spent a lot of time together. And so from what I've heard from others, I think in the past it's always been .com versus stores. And now Mark and Greg are like very much aligned. They have a lot of people that dual report to both of them. It's just kind of like, let's just get this shit done. And that all had to happen before any deal happened. And I think that's like a really important foundation. And what Doug actually did really interesting after the deal happened was he said, I spent $3 billion on this, and yes, I got technology and stuff, but it's the team, it's the people, it's the passion, it's the DNA. And so about 90 days or so after the acquisition, he pulsed certain people, just randomly selected people out of Jet. And that's why, and it seems funny and immaterial enough, but it made a huge impact, we actually got alcohol brought back to Jet's offices. So there was an article in New York Times where we used to have, first of all, we had alcohol whenever we wanted. So that definitely doesn't happen anymore. But
clearly,
we had Thursday happy hours in the office. There's just, a beer on tap, whatever. And of course that went away. Walmart can't pay for alcohol. It's part of the rules. And that was one of the big pieces of feedback was like, we don't network. I mean, the average age at Jet is probably like 27 or something. Yeah. And so it's like that Thursday happy hour, those are your friends. You're not looking to go home to your kids and your family. Like this is your family. And so they brought back Thursday happy hour, which was huge and unprecedented for Walmart. But I thought that was really telling that he made a point to kind of go back and say, like, what have we done to your culture?
Do they have happy hour in Bentonville as well, or no?
So they just started happy hour in Walmart San Francisco, which was huge.
Not
it's
quite
actually,
Bentonville, though, yeah, right?
No.
Okay. Step by step, step by step.
It's a big deal. It's in.
I'm sure it is. So Darren, you work in a company that has multiple brands, right? So you have Sonoma and West Elm, et cetera. How do you balance radicalness within all of those? Is it done from a corporate strategy scenario, or do you rely on, or maybe both, on them coming to you and saying we have to do this and carve out our own kind of niche?
So I think the big thing is everybody's going to work in a different sweet spot, and each one of the brands has their own identity, and you want to, back to the values thing, you want to embrace that. Each of the presidents came through different tracks, to the point about John talked about merchant-driven organization, and some have people who came up through financial tracks. Like, you have to cater that message and some of the work around each one of those opportunities. So I think the biggest thing is create the culture of, if I were to tell people one thing to take away, just start testing things. Like increase the velocity of what you're doing and try to make it like with as few people and as cheap as possible.
But so the
And
testing
you can
piece.
spread that
Okay.
across. You can spread that across the brands, because once you create one level of success, people are usually very open to sit in a room and go, "Oh, I'd like to do that too."
But what if testing doesn't have an ROI?
I'd say pick something that
Initially.
you know. So like front end website, like if you hire a good analytics person, you start doing front end A/B testing, like the ROI's there, right? You will create gains. Pick something that's low lift. I think jumping straight into, we've done a lot of work with virtual reality. Like that's a tough first jump. You have to build some street cred to get there. So like pick a show that 4 or 5 people off the reservation focused on solving very concrete business problems that spreads across all the brands. Back to the internal PR. Make sure that, I think for all of us that work in trying to do different things, you wake up and you put your pants on one leg at a time. It doesn't seem that radical when you're doing it. So get in there and say, hey, here's what we've done. Here's the gain we've had. Yes, I know the scale isn't, hundreds of millions of dollars yet, but look at what this looks like if I take it and I put it across all the brands. Like do simple napkin math to get people excited. And I think that being able to have that open conversation and be open to the criticisms, like I've done plenty of dumb things, like being able to have that makes people feel like you're trying to simulate to the organization and take the best parts of what happens in the organization. And if you're going to replace it and explain to people why you think it's better. Like be willing to be transparent.
Can I say one thing on that that's been kind of, I think if I were to say one thing I'd say to take away from this, from my experience has been, especially when you're trying to initiate that change, is email is just so toxic.
Yep.
And so, I'm based now in San
Touché.
Francisco.
Yeah.
Mark is in Hoboken, and then, the rest of everyone else is in Bentonville. And I made Delta Diamond twice last year. So I made Diamond once, and then I made it again. And so I flew
Will
on
they
average.
give you a jet to fly
No,
home tonight?
I think I get like some Tiffany's glasses, which I probably can't accept because of Walmart's rules or whatever. But so I flew on average 5,000 to 6,000 miles a week, and it was grueling. However, I was in person and I would have these meetings and I was transparent and I would be vulnerable and have a direct eye-to-eye conversation. I mean, it just went so much further than sending an email with a PDF of like, here's my weekly update of what we've done.
I agree completely. You talk about what we all do in our retail business. We sell stuff, right? We don't all sell stuff that people need. In the TV shopping business, we sold just what people wanted. Nobody needed any of that crap that was sold on TV. But last week you said you were here in Vegas, right? And you had an actual exclusive Home Depot product conference. Can you talk about that and just how, imagine actual talking at a conference where you're just talking about the product.
Yeah. So we've been doing this for years and years and years, but every year we bring our store managers together. So the whole field team, which is about 5,000 or 6,000 people together, and we've been coming to Vegas for about 10 years now. And we do our annual meeting, and the biggest part of that meeting is something that we refer to as the product walk. So we take about 350,000 square feet of conference space, show floor space, and we bring in all of our top suppliers, all of our merchants, and we call them merchants, buyers, come in, and it's an opportunity for them and the suppliers to engage directly with our store managers and actually showcase all of the innovation, the engineering, and the product that's coming to market in the coming year. And it's a really terrific opportunity for us to connect the whole company back to this idea that product ultimately is the king or the queen in retail. It's an important kind of cultural exercise.
You actually there in person.
It is
really
hands-on,
looking at the
belly to belly. The store managers are cutting things up with chainsaws and mowing things down, and we have a tractor rodeo, and it's a very, very hands-on, super engaging experience. And that, I think, is in our business very, very important because our merchants do a phenomenal job of curation. I mean, the things that wind up on the shelves of our stores and even on our site, have gone through a pretty rigorous process to get there.
Curation, that used to mean merchandising, right?
Yeah.
Somebody from the museum got on some retail board, and all of a sudden the whole world in retail is curating things.
And I'd love to just connect back. So Darren, you made a point about innovation and the need to connect that innovation to real business problems. That's something we think really seriously about Home Depot. We don't do radical for the sake of radical. We don't do digital for the sake of digital. We try to be really vigilant about connecting our efforts back to specific customer experiences. And I think what has been super helpful for us is creating a framework that the team can maneuver within. So we talk about moving things from experimentation, which is where you have a lot of runway and looseness to try different things, from experimentation into proof of concept, into pilot, and then once we get through pilot, we can start talking about scale. But creating a framework that requires, at some point, a clear tether back to a customer and a business problem has really given the team a lot of flexibility.
So it means everything doesn't have to be reinvented. Not everything has to go back to square one.
I was going to tail on that. We'll just keep going in a circle here. One of the things that was a big unlock when I first showed up at Williams-Sonoma was actually the field force. So, retail gets a tough name, and working in a store gets a tough name when it comes to digital. But I mean, I worked in retail when I was coming up. I'm sure if we ask people to raise their hand, it's a large group of people. They're used to the MacGyver. Every day they come into the store to try to make it work. And it was a very easy way. We can talk about the pure top-down, and Laura's been super supportive of, the majority of our sales happen digitally right now. So great, it's easy to help evangelize and push those programs. But the field was incredible too. And working from both directions made the difference in pushing some of the mind shift inside of the middle side of it. And we do a lot of, let's bring the field in and talk about what problems they have, and have like a small, I don't even want to use the word agile as a buzzword, but like, what would happen if you give a series of engineers and UX people and designers to a group of your good field force? Like, good stuff happens really quickly, and it's a great way to kind of work those things from both ends. So anytime you can get the field together and have those moments, it doesn't have to be a million things, but like, hey, look what we all did together. Cross-functional, it's great stuff.
Great. Two final points and questions I just wanted to make. So we've talked about this. Clearly, it's uncharted waters. Jeff Bezos is spending $8 billion on entertainment content, movies, TV shows, streaming networks, to get people to Amazon Prime to buy more product. That's definitely uncharted waters, and that's really what I think a lot of companies are up against. There's a great movie from 41 years ago called Network that perhaps says it best when the main character, who's a popular news anchor played by Peter Finch, says on air, and I quote, "I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared or losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter." And then he delivers his call to action. "So I want you to get up now. I want you to all get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, 'I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore.'" I think somebody needs to tell that to the people on CNBC and Bloomberg, because they're all trying to do their job, but they all have the same people coming on talking, and they're former this and they're former that, and they're all talking about, and one of them on the plane said, who's a current CEO of a retail mall, "Retailers need to focus on servicing the customer better." Really? So, no shit. I mean, but that's the point. But
That's the point.
You see how the messaging, I mean, look at all the people that are here and all these presentations and decks and all that. Isn't the messaging as important? And they need to have somebody on those networks that's, saying fuck or something that says something relative that causes, because right now they're like, I don't know if you know who Dr. Joyce Brothers was, but she used to be in the news. You'd call Dr. Joyce up and you'd say, "Joyce, we wanted you to talk about how bad things are on 47th Street. And she'd come on the air and like a soundbite. Things are terrible on 47th Street. She'd never been to 47th Street. But it's that kind of mentality where people are talking about those kinds of things. And don't you think the messaging, I mean, it's exciting, but it is tricky. Katie.
Yeah, I think it's tricky because no one knows the answer, right? And so you can say something like that because you're not going to be wrong in that statement, but the other statements are a little bit harder because you don't know how it's going to play out. So I think that's just people kind of waiting it out to see what the right way is. Is spending $9 billion on entertainment to get Prime customers going to work? Who knows? Is the Prime customer actually profitable with how much split shipment? Who knows? But it's market share.
Said the girl from Jet.
But I think that comment about servicing the customer is never going to be a wrong statement.
Okay.
And that's, I think, why you overwhelmingly hear those comments.
So in that sense, so this has been 3 days, right? Amazing amount of caliber of people that have come here. I'm amazed that still some of them do PowerPoints and bar charts and before and after kind of stuff. But the whole notion of radical, being radical, you just got here, right? Oh,
Yeah.
who just got here
Yeah.
last night?
Well, I was in-
So you missed the whole thing, Chris,
Yeah.
so never mind.
Yeah.
So Darren, so you've been here. What's the most radical thing that you've seen? Other than this, of course.
So I would put it in a weird context. I thought the person who spoke about Appear Here, the person that does the Airbnb for retail spaces. So for anybody who had seen the evolution of that, and I think that's super cool. I saw him speak 2 or 3 years ago, and I thought it was a really good idea. And to the point of the discussion, kind of got poo-pooed in the room. I thought it was radical because I think it's getting people to realize that your stores are still, you can do all the online marketing. It's clear that the cost of acquisition is continuing to rise over time. Stores are still a really effective way to acquire customers. And you find your ways to not build yourself into the massive square footage or long leases or these sorts of things. So I think it's finally seeing the right conversation. That's what I thought was radical. It's like somebody who had kind of pushed through and fought, and now you're seeing that it's little companies that are trying to start their own baked goods are taking spaces, but then you also have huge brands like, I think they mentioned Tory Burch is going into them. I think now we're getting to the right conversation, which is, what's the experience? How are we acquiring customers? How are we bringing people around the brand? How are we doing something that's a surprise and delight in your day? I think that's radical. It's not just the same, let's talk about, search engine optimization. Let's talk about, what e-commerce platform we're on. We're now back talking about customers and customer acquisition and making people happy.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard because you have to do both, right? Yeah. Like at least at our scale, like SEO, oh my God, that's like billions of dollars if you like change conversion by 10 basis points or whatever. I'm making up numbers, but and I think you asked this question, but we never got to it. It's really hard to do both. So you always have to be working on conversion or A/B testing if the button's green or red or whatever, but you also have to be looking at, okay, in 20 years, where will this baby today, what are they going to be wanting from us in parallel pathing?
That's tough, right?
It's tough
Yeah.
because especially when you're publicly traded, the orange to green button is always going to win, right? Because that's money in your pocket today.
But don't you think it's table stakes now? I mean, to me, it's like, we all talk about, how long we've been in the industry. I had this was 10 years ago, I had a draw drop moment where somebody said I learned that in my digital marketing 101 class. And I was like, they have a digital marketing 101? I thought it was just marketing. And
Yes, or database marketing, right.
So
now it's an algorithm.
To me, the reason why I point to something like real estate strategy is to me, the being good with digital, it's table stakes. If you don't have somebody who's good who's running your website, if you don't have somebody who's good with SEO, all the things that are, I don't want to call them free, but they're low-hanging fruit, yeah, of course. And that's why I brought up the 3-box framework, which is just a good thing of but are you balancing? When almost everywhere I've worked, including Amazon, when you sit down, everybody has stuff in box 1, which is oh my God, we need to do all this stuff and fix today. But it's how do you fix today and lay these, if you do something like a small pop-up and it yields results, look at what that did for Adidas, right? It changed the trajectory of their brand on these dark stores and stuff like that. How do you do that once and show people it has legs and then make that a core part of your business? So
Yeah, great.
I don't know.
Chris?
Yeah, it's so easy. The dialogue around retail is tough right now for sure, right? I mean, the CNBC analogy, but let's not forget who we are. The basics of retail aren't that different, even though the way we get there is changing. You've got to put the customer first. you've got to be in stock, you've got to be, you've got to be good at service, you've got to be priced appropriately, and you've got to be bringing the right convenience and value to the market. And that's, at least at the Home Depot, those are the things that we continue to be focused on, albeit in
you don't
slightly
have to have a
different
rock and roll
ways.
band in a bar and brownies and all that at Home Depot? No, because I think some of people think of this experiential thing as being just, you got to entertain them, you got to do this and have, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I
what you
think
just
theater
described-
and retail is important, but that theater doesn't have to be the rock band and all that kind of thing.
Correct.
I mean, we run clinics in our stores every weekend that are incredibly well subscribed. We just celebrated our 20-year anniversary with a kids workshop that we do in our store, and those kids are actually now at a point where they're starting to shop and actually work in some of our stores
great.
because they've
I think
grown
that's
up with
great.
it.
That's terrific.
So I think, there are a lot of things that you can do within the basic framework of what makes a retailer successful, regardless of the macro environment.
Well, great. So John, are you happy you've collaborated and supported this event this morning? Are you embarrassed? Or... come on. What do you think? Just in terms of this conversation.
I actually had a couple of questions.
Great.
One was I'd really, probably not here, but like to know more about what a tractor rodeo is. Not really sure what that, but really interested in.
It can mean a lot of things.
Especially in Vegas, yeah.
A lot of retail, right? We keep hearing about, X brand needs to reinvent itself. X brand needs to reinvent itself. Do different things, right? What's the balance between staying true to your brand while still reinventing yourself to stay relevant? I see that those are, in some ways, somewhat mutually exclusive, it feels, right? As we have conversations about brands and what they need to do to change. But what is that balance like? How do you balance those two core concepts of changing and reinventing yourself while still staying true to the brand itself?
Yeah, for us at Depot, there's obviously a lot of change in the business. We're investing $11 billion back into our business over the next 3 years. A lot of that will go into stores, our associates, our supply chain, and then a lot of the infrastructure required to compete or continue to compete in an interconnected retail environment. What's not going to change for us that is inherently connected to our brand are the values of our company. And again, I mentioned we wear those on the chest of our apron, and then we have this concept of an inverted pyramid that sits right alongside that values wheel, where the most senior leadership in the company is actually at the bottom of that pyramid. And the intent of that sort of diagram is to give everybody the idea that a reminder that as leaders, we're all here to support the frontline associate that actually is talking to that customer every day. So the top of that inverted pyramid is the customer. And I think, in terms of our brand at the Home Depot, the values and the way we think about the customer is something that, regardless of the magnitude of our investments and the magnitude of the change in the way we go to market, those things aren't going to waver at all.
Darren?
Yeah, I was going to say it's still, I agree a lot with the Home Depot philosophy that you have. Things have changed in retail, but it's still a great experience. It's still great product with a great story with great service. Now, what that product is and what that story is and what that service is evolving more rapidly than it probably ever has. But I think the question is, how do you evolve it and manage the velocity of change? How do you make it so that you're doing new things without alienating your core customer base, the core person or the core objective? I think, if you look at Clayton Christensen and the jobs that your brand does, I think that's more relevant now than ever. Have a moment to figure out what you're trying to do for your customer and figure out how you change your story, your service, your products to fit that. But it doesn't mean this crazy departure just because somebody can put up a business model that's super cool but doesn't make any money, and VCs are willing to throw a lot of money at it. Doesn't mean that 10 years, 20 years from now we'll be talking about it. But take the good things out of that are shifts
Look
in
at
the
Fab.
service.
Remember Fab? Anderson Horowitz? $360 million in 2 years. right down the toilet. But they understood the process and that part of that sort of startup kind of mentality. But that's when you're like, they were giving money away on backs of napkins. If you saw the business plan for Fab going in to say, I need $160 million more from these guys out there, it would blow your mind when they said, sure, boom, they wrote the check for $160 million. But it's not that, it's only illustrative of this crazy sort of time that we're in. Katie, final word.
For me, it's not your business model that's your core competency or your center of gravity. It's your mission and your vision. And so I think this is what I kind of heard from the previous comments is I'd go back to really understanding what my core competency is, my center of gravity, and then you evolve around that. And so you're not really losing who you are. You might change how you make money. And I think, Ford or whomever just updated that they're now in the business of moving people or transportation of people, not selling cars or whatever it might be. So go back to your mission and vision, which we spend with all of our startups that we start an exorbitant amount of time with. Every word, and our values are so important. And then everything you do to get there doesn't really matter. And so you can evolve those things, but if you stay true to that, or you actually make a concerted effort like Ford does, like that vision no longer makes sense for us, and you pivot. But you kind of have to anchor on that, I believe, before you do something radical.
And have the discipline to stick it.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Robin, thank you for this. I think it's really great that the Robin Report, especially the Robin Report, is sponsoring something like this. Hopefully our little indie little group that we have here in the basement, moves upstairs next year. Anil. But it's really great, and I thank all of you because I think you are part of legacy companies that are certainly relevant, are certainly doing really, really great things, and ideally these kinds of seminars and these talks spark, further conversation. So thank you, Katie. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
A final note. I just want to say that these are the three types of people that our legacy brands need. I mean, brilliant stuff, brilliant things that you guys are doing. And it all starts here, and that's what I've heard today. And we're very lucky to have had you here. Thank you so much. And thank all you guys for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.